Is the CVLife red dot sight too cheap to consider, and what is it actually good for? Hi, I'm Tina from Target Tamers, and we purchased the CVLife 1x22x33 red dot sight to answer these questions and see what the real story is. First off, it varies in price from around $17 all the way up to $50. We nabbed it at around $30, so it's safe to say that it's a budget red dot sight under 50 bucks. We chose the sand/apricot color just because it's something different to the all too often seen black. For as much as I wanted to prove this to be a garbage item, it ended up growing on me. So its specs are, it has 1x magnification, a 22x33mm open heads-up display lens that is multi-coated, 1 MOA adjustments, a 3.2-inch length, 2 illumination colors, 5 brightness settings for each LED color, 4 reticle options. It takes a CR2032 battery and it's made in China. Optical performance, so it's very basic in terms of optics, though I was impressed with its neutral color fidelity. It has a concave multi-coated lens, and that's the part that reflects the reticle back to your eye. At the center, it's decently sharp to get on target with, and in actual use, it seems like there's a lot of distortion around the edges of the field of view, but it's actually something different. What makes the optics seem like they're bad is actually a reflection of the LED emitter housing. You can see quite clearly this highly reflective image in the glass, as you can see with my pictures. This can be extremely distracting. It wasn't so bad when you're actually shooting and focusing on the target, but there's no denying that it contributes to the perception of poor optical performance. The glass does excellently in daylight and in normal conditions. In low light conditions, it did nothing to make the image brighter or clearer, as is the case with red dot sights. So as far as optical quality goes, I recommend it in normal conditions for inside 100 yards in daylight. Build quality. I think the CVLife red dot sight is a solid unit. It's split into two parts, the upper that is the red dot sight and the lower that is the integrated mount. I've put over 300 rounds through it and so far so good. There aren't any loose screws and there is no movement between the two parts. Now the mount and the red dot sight housing are made out of aluminum alloy, while the LED emitter housing and the reticle knob seem to be made out of plastic. It's compact in width and height and has a 3.2-inch length. And the HUD, the heads-up display, will appeal to many. So for the money, I applaud the build quality and the compact size. When it comes to water resistance, it's just that, water resistant. I do not deem it waterproof for use in heavy rain or for submersion. I did, however, leave it out in a light but consistent rain for up to an hour and it held up well. Though the battery compartment has a rubber O-ring seal around it, my concern is more with the LED emitter housing. There seems to be only one strip of a silicone glue that is keeping water out, and I wouldn't trust this compartment in getting wet. Because the lens frame is so thin, the lens definitely saw some raindrops that did not bead or shed off. It's distracting if you're shooting in these conditions with water on the lens. So the build is ideal for use in normal conditions, but in adverse conditions, I can't recommend it. Mounting, it's really a breeze. It fits the Picatinny rails. The included Allen wrenches are there for you to mount it to a rail, and you will need them to make the elevation and windage adjustments. Now, if you wanted to use this with something other than a Picatinny rail by removing the mount and using an adapter, I wouldn't recommend it. I would say go with something different altogether, and that's for two reasons. One is that it doesn't look easy to remove the mount off the red dot sight, and two, the springs and other cogs and gears in there seem to be attached to the base. So if you're going to use it for something different, I wouldn't recommend it, but if it's going right on top of a pick rail, then you're good to go. You can run it with backup iron sights. I ran mine with a standard AR front sight, set up for a lower third co-witness, and that's how I like it. I recommend bore sighting and confirming you have zero with your sights, because at the end of the day, this is still a red dot sight, budget or no. Illumination. So the CVLife has dual illumination, 2 LEDs, red and green. I find that I'm partial to red just because that has been the standard for a long time and I'm used to it, but I did find that I was pleasantly surprised with the green illumination, and it did seem sharper to my eyes. Now each LED has 5 brightness settings and it's very easy to use with the knob on top of the body. One thing I always look for in illumination knobs on red dot sights is the ability to rotate both forwards and backwards past 0 or past the off position, and the CVLife caters to that, and that earns massive bonus points in my book. The only weird thing about it is because it's a heads-up display dot sight, point is it's located on top of the body, so your fingers can get in the way when it's mounted on the gun and you're adjusting for illumination. Not a big deal though. So in short, I approve of the LED colors, the illumination quality, and its ease of use. Furthermore, I was surprised that it's daylight bright. I had no issues detecting settings 4 and 5 in daylight. The reticle is highly visible against targets in various terrains. However, illumination is so bright that I couldn't recommend it for low light conditions. While I was still able to see my target with the dimmest setting in low light, there is blooming that will interfere with target acquisition after dark for things like, say, varmint hunting or home defense. Illumination is powered by a single CR2032 battery. CVLife includes 2 batteries in the box. This is a great freebie because it does not have any battery conservation features like auto off. To turn off the illumination, turn the knob to either the R or the G setting. Overall, while I like the illumination intensities for daylight use, in low light conditions and beyond, even the dimmest setting can cause blooming and washout. Reticle options. The CVLife dot has 4 reticles to choose from: crosshairs with a circle and dot, crosshairs with dot, circle with dot, and a dot. I have to admit that the reticles were exceptionally sharp for a red dot sight. If you have astigmatism or are near or far-sighted, you may see that reticle a little bit differently, but that is just the nature of the beast with your type of vision and using a reflex red dot sight. But I think it did great at the range, especially with the magnifier behind it. So usually I get some sort of dot distortion with a red dot sight in front of a magnifier, but the CVLife red dot sight for me and to date has been the easiest red dot sight to get a sharp reticle by adjusting the diopter on the magnifier. This absolutely took me by surprise. Now my favorite reticle is the circle with the dot, and at the end of the day, having multiple reticles is really neat, but I think most people will have their pet favorite reticle and stick with it. Even so, for 30 bucks, I think it's great. Turrets. So these have the absolute worst turrets I have ever handled. I suppose there's worse out there, but for me these are the worst. They adjust in 1 MOA clicks, if you can call them clicks. There's lash in the springs and you can feel it. It's obvious, and it's why it only has tactile clicks in one direction, and that would be clockwise. So going down in elevation and right in windage. So even so, it made it difficult for me to get on 0 past 25 yards to my liking. So I got on paper, then I started hitting steel at 25 on a cardboard cutout at 50 yards, and then steel again at 100 yards. I could hear the ping, so that was good enough for me out of a $30 sight. Did it hold 0? This is something that everybody wants to know about a budget red dot sight, is can it hold at 0? And for me it did for the first 225 rounds, after which I decided to play with a different sight for a while, and then I came back to the CVLife one. Now when I came back to it, did I have 0? No, I did not, and that's because I did a couple things differently. One is I kind of half pie mounted it to the rail, and 2, I changed out the reticle and the illumination color. Now all 4 reticles are bound to the same turret system, so on paper there shouldn't be any shift in the point of impact when switching between reticles, but that might be one thing to look for and test for while you're at the range. The primary thing is when switching between the 2 LEDs, the red and green. So say you sight in with the red illumination and then you switch to the green while you're at the range, you can have a significant shift in the point of impact when switching between those 2 colors. So look for that and maybe compensate for that at the range. Otherwise it just might be best to stick with 1 reticle and 1 color to have maximum accuracy and confidence in your 0. So overall, how would I rate the turret quality and the zeroing retention? I think the zeroing makes up somewhat for the mushy turret, so I give it a solid 3 out of 5 for recreational applications. An observation I wanted to make before I forget is that the LED is visible downrange to, I'd say, about 15-20 yards. Beyond that, it's not so obvious. But if you're in close quarters or say in a blacked out building, the LED will give your position away. On that same note, the glass is extremely reflective and the glare will give you away during daylight. If the sun catches it, you're done. After all that, do I recommend the CVLife red dot sight? It is Target Tamers approved, but only as a recognized budget sight for use in normal conditions, for casual applications like plinking, some target range work, and maybe some pest hunting on things like rabbits and rats. I would say that it's best paired with small caliber low power firearms like 22s and PCPs, but some have successfully used it with spring action guns, shotguns, shooting 5.56, 9mm, and more. I would question it's the glass lens ability to stay intact, but if it does, it would likely be the best red dot for the cheapest amount of money you'd have spent yet. If you have less than $50 to spend, you would get similar quality and performance out of twin-like model alternatives. Now beyond that, for most hunting, self-defense and professional applications like law enforcement, I cannot advocate for it. I do want to say that the CVLife red dot sight will see future sessions at the range for plinking and hitting steel, even if that's all I'll ever do with it, because it works and it held my 0. I may just put it on my pellet gun for the rabbits that are consistently getting under the hoods of my vehicles. Now with that said, the written review to the CVLife red dot sight will be in a link down below. Thank you for tuning in today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and get outside.